And the dawn seems so lonely, we fill it up with only two. the melody someone sang to you long ago. As beautiful as the song inside of you, hear the melody, feel it guiding you. Always homeward, leading you here where I'm deep in the silence, so perfect and slow. Holding you like melody someone sang to you long ago. As beautiful as the song inside us, someone sang to melody, feel it guiding us. Beautiful as song inside us, someone sang to melody, hear their eyes. Beautiful as the song inside us, hear the melody, feel it guiding us. Silence, so perfect and slow. I'm deep in the silence, so perfect and when the sky is falling and your heart is broken, are the angels calling when you are alone? When the sky is falling and your heart is broken, are the angels calling when you are alone? Will you be ready then when the angels call you? Will your heart be open when the sky is falling? Will you be ready then when the sky is falling? And your heart is broken, and your heart is broken. Are the angels calling? Are the angels calling? When you are on, will you? The sky is falling, the angels calling. Will your heart is broken? Angels calling. When the sky is falling, will you? The sky is falling, the angels calling. The heart is broken, your heart is broken. Angels calling. Where the sky is falling, will you be ready then? When the sky is falling and your heart is broken, are the angels calling when you are alone? When the sky is falling, the sky is falling, heart is broken, are the angels call? To the angels call when you are alone. When the sky is falling, the sky is falling, heart is broken, to the the angels call when you are alone. When the sky is falling, His flames His heart is broken. Jesus call to the angels call when you are alone. Will you be ready then? When the angels call you, will your heart be open? When the sky is falling, will you be ready then? When the sky is falling, and your heart is broken, angels calling. When you are alone, will you be ready then? When the angels call you, will your heart be open? Oh, it is Will you be ready then? Will you be ready then? Will you be ready then?
Please stand. When the storms of life are raging, Lord, stand by me. When the current pulls me under, Lord, stand by me. When the rising waters toss me like a ship upon the sea, you rule the wind and water, Lord, stand by me. Stand by me, stand by me, lift me up from the restless sea. When I am lost, when love can't be found, when no one cares, Lord, stand by me. In the midst of persecution, Lord, stand by me. When my enemies surround me, Lord, stand by me. When the tyrant wheels his chariot and the armies wage their might, when the darkness overwhelms me, Lord, stand by me.
Reading from the first letter of St. Paul to the Corinthians. But I shall show you a still more excellent way. If I speak in human and angelic tongues but do not have love, I'm a resounding gong or a clashing cymbal. And if I have the gift of prophecy and comprehend all mysteries and all knowledge, if I have all faith so as to move mountains but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away everything I own, and if I hand my body over so that I may boast but do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. It is not jealous. Love is not pompous. It is not inflated. It is not rude. It does not seek its own interest. It is not quick-tempered. It does not brood over injury. It does not rejoice over wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. If there are prophecies, they will be brought to nothing. If tongues, they will cease. If knowledge, it will be brought to nothing. For we know partially, and we prophesy partially. But when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. When I was a child, I used to talk as a child, think as a child, reason as a child. When I became a man, I put aside childish things. At present, we see indistinctly as in a mirror. But then face to face. At present, I know partially. Then I shall know fully as I am fully known. So faith, hope, and love remain, these three. The greatest of these is love. The word of the Lord. I invite you to be seated. Thanks for coming out again this evening for this third and last night of the mission. It's been a great joy to be part of this. And as we've talked about getting back to the basics, we're going to go back to the basic of fasting, which we're called to in this Lenten season, to fast. And it lines up very well, I believe, with the Archdiocesan priority of unity. To form a culture of unity is what the desire of the Archdiocese is. I don't know if you had the opportunity to participate in the Unity event that happened a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, at the CHI Center, where people from parishes from all over the Archdiocese gathered for workshops, prayer, and entertainment. It was a great event to be part of, a way of drawing everyone together, because we do have quite a diverse Archdiocese. I was thinking, someone mentioned that Father Gaddaci does the African Mass, and so he does a Mass in French. And so every Sunday there, besides the English Masses, there is a French Mass that takes place here in town. I'm at Our Lady of Lourdes in St. Adelbert's. Also, the Korean community worships at St. Adelbert's at Andrew Kim Parish. At the parish, they use the church, but the parish name is Andrew Kim. There's a Korean Mass. At St. Peter's, there's a Vietnamese Mass. There are many Spanish Masses throughout the Archdiocese. There is a diversity that we have within the Archdiocese. It's interesting in looking at how things are distributed. The deanery that I'm in right now with Our Lady of Lourdes, and the deanery that's directly south, which takes up the southeast part of Omaha going down into Bellevue, when we do a count, 60% of the people in those two deaneries that attend Mass on Sunday are Spanish speaking. Only 40% of the Masses are in Spanish. And so we have huge churches like St. Stanislaus, and I've celebrated Mass a number of times covered there, that can hold like 800 people in there, and there's about 40 people there for Mass. And then they're hanging from the rafters at Our Lady of Guadalupe because of so many people going to that parish and celebrating there. St. Joseph's, which is just east of Our Lady of Lourdes. It's the same thing. They're packed for those Spanish-speaking Masses. And right now the diocese in doing pastoral planning, trying to figure out how we can rearrange things and make it so that we have those spaces for the people that are attending. But that's part of that unity is making sure people feel welcome and there's a space for them and there's a place for them within the community. And when I was in Fremont, one of the things that we talked about, there's a number of Spanish-speaking people that were moving in at that time, not only in Fremont, but in Columbus, Schuyler, Madison, Norfolk. A lot of that had to do with what was the IBP plants, now the Tyson plants throughout the rural part of the diocese. And talking about that hospitality and how do we welcome and how do we make people feel comfortable. And one of the things that we did was put an image of Our Lady of Guadalupe in the church, something that was important to the devotion of many people from Mexico, part of their heritage. And I compared it to the fact that, if a person came to that church in Fremont, and we're still in the old church, which had many steps going up, but it had a ramp that went around the side. And I said, we put the ramp around the side so people, especially that have disabilities, would be able to see that they were welcomed in the church, invited into the church, that there's that hospitality there. In the same way, we need to find those ways to make sure that visually and other ways that people feel welcome. And that's so important when it comes to that unity is that welcome. I think that's one of the hallmarks of St. Pius, and it has been throughout its history, is its radical hospitality and being a place of welcome. And we need to continue to always evaluate that of how can we be more welcoming? How can we keep our doors open to everyone who wants to come and to be part of the parish and is seeking? And that's so important, and that unity is that part. The way that I see it tying into fasting, especially as Catholics, as we're called to fast during Lent, we do it together. And we know that we do it together. I remember one of my professors in the seminary talking about being in downtown St. Paul on Ash Wednesday and seeing all the people walking around downtown with ashes on their forehead. That sign that we entered into this Lenten season and that we do this together. We're journeying together. And it's so much easier to do things that are difficult or challenging when we do it together. I know for myself, the diets that I've been on, and I've been on many diets throughout my life, I had more success when I'm dieting with someone else, when I have someone challenging me, or when it comes to working out, exercising. If I have someone to do that with, I've been more successful in those times than if I'm just trying to do it on my own. Because I know there are days that I do not want to do it. There are days that I just want to give up. Or I change in the hardest thing, I think, with working out is that workout clothing is a lot like nap clothing. They're very much the same. And so get those on, and then there's that kind of draw to the couch or that draw to the bed and to go out. But if I have a commitment to meet someone, either to go for a walk or go for a bike ride or go to the gym, then I'm more likely to do that. And so that unity can prompt us to know that we're doing this together. I'd mentioned that I'm doing Exodus 90 with a group of men. And so when I'm thinking about those things that I give up during this time, I know that those other 11 men that are part of that with me are doing the same thing. And they're making those same sacrifices. And it gives me that impetus to continue on. And when I'm struggling with that, I can text one of the other men in the group and just say, I'm struggling with this. They do the same thing. One of the parts of this Exodus 90 is to have an anchor, and there's 2 anchors that I have that we're on the same text stream and text back and forth. Because there'll always be those temptations that draw us away. When it comes to fasting, there's always going to be that temptation. We live in a land of plenty. We have many things that we have access to. But to be able to make that sacrifice can be a struggle, but there's a great purpose to fasting. One of them is discipline. It's to grow in that discipline of self-denial and sacrifice. The Holy Father, in speaking about fasting, said, "Fasting also means changing our attitude towards other people and towards all creatures. From the temptation to devour everything to satisfy our greed, to the ability to suffer for love." And that discipline, as we give things up, enables us to open ourselves up in love to just make those sacrifices for others. but also to grow in that discipline, that strength, know that we can do that. Because there's always going to be temptations, there's always going to be challenges, and the more that we can resist those, and the more that we're able to turn away from those, and that we practice that with our own fasting, it strengthens us. There's also that part of offering it up. My mom's here tonight, and one of the things I hated hearing her say when I was growing up, especially like when I was an adolescent and I was growing very quickly, and you get those just growing pains, and I'd complain about it, and she'd say, offer it up. What? I don't want to complain about it. And if I'm going to offer it up, what am I offering it up for? But one of the things that I found for myself in my experience of fasting is how powerful that is to offer it up for a particular intention. And to offer it up for someone else. As the Holy Father says, to suffer for love for others. When I was pastor of Hooper and Scribner, I was working a CEC week. Father Joe Mish, who is pastor in Columbus, was giving one of the talks. And whenever I was a director of a CEC weekend, especially in the rural area, one of my first calls was to Father Joe Mish. And he gave a great talk on grace, and he was always very generous in coming on the Friday night and giving that talk, driving up from Columbus to Norfolk to do that. And so I'd heard him speak many times, but he told one that touched me in particular about fasting, or a sense of offering up, and offering up suffering, offering up in sacrifice. And he talked about how when he would go to visit parishioners who were in the hospital, at home, in hospice, that Christians, one of the things he would invite them to do is to offer up their suffering. And in particular, to offer it up for someone who's been away from the church, that they might come back. And then he'd put a fishing net in his office. And through the year, when people would come to the door and come back to church wanting to seek confession, he'd put a fish on the net. And he'd say, when he'd have a number of people praying, that net got pretty full. But that offering up for someone else. When I'd heard that, it wasn't long that I was back in my parish, and there was a parishioner there who had been away from the church for a long time. He'd come back within that last year. And he had cancer, he had bone cancer. And I was visiting with him at home, had come over to pray with him, anoint him, bring him communion. And he was talking about the pain that he was experiencing. And he sat in a recliner in his living room. It was very hard for him to lay down. He slept in that recliner. But he said there, right across from his recliner on the wall was a crucifix. And he said whenever he started to feel that pain, or when he felt like it was too much, he would just focus on the crucifix. And he would just keep praying and just joining his suffering to Christ. And when he said that, I said, Sarge, for a long time, you were away from the church. And when you're doing that, when you're feeling that pain and you're focusing on the cross, could you offer that up for someone who's been away from the church, just like you were for so long? And he said, yes, yeah, he would do that. And the next day, I got back from teaching at Archbishop Bergen in Fremont, got back to Hooper to the rectory, and I was doing a few things in the office there, and the doorbell rang. And the gentleman was at the door. He'd been away from the church for 22 years. And he wanted to know if I had a rosary and if I could teach him how to pray the rosary. He learned it when he was young and wanted to learn it again. And he wanted to go to confession, but he didn't want to go right away. If I had some material for him to do some examination and preparation for it. And then if I had a Bible. And one thing you'll find in almost every rectory is lots of Bibles laying around somewhere. If you have religious ed or any other program, you have Bibles around, and gave him a Bible. And then he came back a couple days later for the Sacrament of Reconciliation. He was there at Mass the next day. I shared that with Sarge, and I've done that a number of times over the years with people, that inviting them to offer up for a particular intention. But I find it powerful in my own, when I'm fasting, I fast for a particular thing. When I was pastor here at St. Pius, when I had to make a difficult decision or to have a difficult conversation with someone, would usually fast the day before and offering that up for the intention of that, whatever it was, to turn out well. I find myself, especially in this Lenten season, fasting more for Catholic Charities in our capital campaign, and just offering that up for the success of that and the success of the mission of Catholic Charities as we're going forward. There is that power of offering that up. I didn't like to hear it when I was young, but I realize the older that I get, how powerful that is. And again, that whole thing of fasting, and as we do that together, it draws us together in that unity. We know that we're doing this together. And one of the things that's unfortunate right now, because of COVID, is some of those gatherings that we're used to during Fridays during Lent, whether it be pasta Fridays here or fish fries in other parishes, is a way of the community coming together, sharing a meal together, sharing fun together, even in the midst of the sacrifice, the making of not eating meat. Although I don't know how much of a sacrifice a full plate of pasta is, or shrimp is, for myself, but we do this together, and there's that unity that comes through that. And fasting is so powerful, but it is a challenge. The first time I gave this mission 2 years ago, it was at Schuyler, Nebraska. And for the two parishes, and I did it for the English-speaking parishioners there, because I don't speak Spanish, but the invitation was for the English-speaking. They were going to have another mission for the Spanish-speaking during that Lenten season. And Father Jerry Gonringer, who was pastor there, the second night of the mission, he couldn't be there. And he told me, I was in the rectory in the afternoon, and he said, I'm not going to be there tonight, but that's all right, because I don't want to listen about fasting. I don't want to hear about it. And I said, well, that's bad news, because fasting is the third night. I take it a little bit out of order. I know, as you know, I do prayer, almsgiving, fasting, instead of prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. He says, oh, okay, I'll be there. But I know that call to sacrifice, we're not used to it. We live in a community in a world of abundance. And because of that, it's hard to sacrifice. We don't like doing it. When I was in high school and in college, I heard so often that, instead of giving something up during Lent, to do something good. And I attached to that right away. Okay, I'll give up Brussels sprouts and watermelon. Or I won't give up anything, because it's much better to do good during Lent. Well, yeah, it is good to do good things during Lent. That's almsgiving. That's giving of ourselves. Whether we're giving money or giving of ourselves, that's an important part. But there's that leg of fasting. Just like any tripod, prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, you take one of them away, it's not as balanced. We need that fasting part as part of the season. The Lord gives us that example. The first Sunday of Lent, every year we hear how Jesus went into the desert for 40 days. And although it's a challenge, we grow in discipline, we grow in unity, and by offering up our sacrifice for ourselves or for others, there's a great grace in there. And as we do that, it builds us in that unity. And unity is so important. And another piece of that that is humility. The Holy Father talks about this, and when he talked about fasting, and doesn't talk about giving up necessarily fasting from food, but he also talks about, do you want to fast this Lent? Fast from hurting words and say kind words. Fast from sadness and be filled with gratitude. Fast from anger and be filled with patience. Fast from pessimism and be filled with hope. Fast from worries and trust in God. Fast from complaints and contemplate simplicity. Fast from pressures and be prayerful. Fast from bitterness and fill your heart with joy. Fast from selfishness and be compassionate to others. Fast from grudges and be reconciled. Fast from words and be silent so you can listen. Those are things to fast from also that helps to build that unity and to build up that. But it calls for that humility, knowing our place and having that respect for others in their place. Since our theme is baseball, getting back to the basics in this spring training, one of my favorite baseball stories that I ever heard was told by Jack Morris. Jack Morris was a pitcher for the Minnesota Twins in the 1991 World Series. And he's an all-star pitcher. He's in the Hall of Fame. And I was listening to a game a few years back, and Jack Morrison was doing some of the commentary. And after the game, they had an extended post-game show, and they're just talking about baseball and baseball stories. And he was talking about a coach that he had when he was younger. And the discussion kind of revolved around whether or not umpires give the benefit of the doubt to rookies or to veterans. And it was pretty much agreed upon that they give it to veterans. That guys who've been in the league, whether it's the batter or the pitcher, they get the call. And Jack Morris said, when I was a young pitcher coming up, close ones to the plate, I usually didn't get that call. But when I was a veteran pitcher, when I got older, had been in the league a while, I would get those calls from the umpire. But he told a story about one of his coaches that he had who had come up through the minor leagues with Cleveland's team. In his first major league game, he was playing for the Cleveland Indians, and they were playing at Yankee Stadium. And he was catching this game, and Mickey Mantle was at bat. And there was a couple pitches that were really close, and the umpire called ball. Mickey Mantle didn't even make an attempt. He didn't move. He just kind of watched them. And the catcher was grousing, and so after each one, he'd be saying, that's a strike, and kind of making his opinion known to the umpire and to Mickey Mantle. Eventually, Mantle ended up hitting a double off the wall, and then he really was complaining. And so as Mantle was going towards second base, the umpire walked around the plate, took out his brush, and bent down and was face-to-face with the catcher, face mask to face mask. And he said, "Look around you. There's 45,000 people here, and none of them came to see you play." That humility, knowing what our place is. And ultimately, knowing our place as human beings is we are creatures. And we are brothers and sisters to one another. And when we recognize that, when we embrace that, we can have that unity with one another. But it takes that humility that we are equal and treating our brothers and sisters as equals. So Jesus speaks in John's Gospel in his great prayer as he prays for his disciples and he prays for those who will come after. He says, "I pray not only for them, but also for those who will believe in me through their word, so that they may all be one, as you, Father, are in me and I in you, that they also may be in us, and the world may believe that you sent me." That desire for us to be one. St. Paul uses the image a number of times in his writings, in Corinthians in particular, of the body. That Christ is the head, and we are all parts of the body. And each part is important. Each person is important. And that unity is important. And you see that unity and working together is so important. We're not in competition with one another. We all have the same goal. We all need to be in the same place at the end. I was just doing marriage prep this past weekend with a couple, and we're talking about communication and problem solving. And one of the questions is, I always have to win, or something to that effect. Or it doesn't say I always have to win, it says my future spouse always has to win. And so the person's answering for the other. And many times there is that kind of competition, and we can get competitive with one another. But the goal is to complete together. All of our goal is to be in heaven forever together. And so to help one another out. During the midst of this pandemic, I've seen how important it is to work together. In the work that I've been doing with Catholic Charities, we've been working with other nonprofits, sharing resources with one another in particular. Both Catholic Charities and St. Vincent de Paul, both Catholic organizations, both very important organizations in our archdiocese and our community. We have different programs, but we have some similar programs, and one of the ones we share in common is food insecurity. We have pantries in different places because one of the issues is transportation anyway. But Catholic Charities was blessed. We've had a couple deliveries from Tyson of tens of thousands of pounds of chicken frozen. And we've shared those with St. Vincent de Paul. We've shared that with Saving Grace. Saving Grace is another organization here in Omaha that goes around daily and picks up food from grocery stores and from caterers and restaurants, things that cannot be served any longer because it's about ready to expire. They're going to toss it out. And so fresh fruits and vegetables, dairy products, juices, they pick up and then they deliver to like the Juan Diego Center, St. Catholic Charities and other ones. And then we've also been giving them some of our meat to take to some of the other pantries and shelters that they work with. Sharing those resources is important. We're not in competition with each other. We are working together. As we've been looking at our new building in Bedford, I want to establish relationships. St. Joseph or St. Francis Ministries is right across the street. They have a whole different kind of postulate, but to see how we can work together. We are in conversation already with EPS, that is our neighbor to the south, and how we can work together and with synergy. And as they work with young women, whether it be behavioral health, domestic violence, pantry needs, how we can work together in hand, or some of our clients who are coming who are pregnant and could use EPS's services. They don't do much post, but we have the Mentoring Moms program and other programs for family strengthening. And so we can work hand in hand. St. Vincent de Paul just built one of their, is at 90th and Fort for one of their stores. And then with us being on 90th and Bedford, how we can, each person's clients going back and forth between the two, be able to serve better. That unity is so important. That unity is important for all of us. And one of the things that I think people are starting to understand is how important we are to one another and how much we miss being together. This pandemic and keeping people separated has been difficult. It's been challenging because we haven't had that contact that we've had before. We haven't been able to celebrate great things like we have before. We haven't been able to mourn together like we did before. And all those things are essential for us as human beings. And we are truly missing that. And people are recognizing that more and more. I've celebrated Mass for quite a while. From the time that I was here until a year ago, I've had Mass in Emmanuel Fontenelle at least once a week. And not being able to go into that building. And when I have, the only time I have is if someone's near death and to go to anoint that person. And going in there, usually in a nursing home, people are in the common spaces. There's no one in the common spaces. Meals are brought to them, and they're not able to eat in the dining room together. And you can sense that loneliness. I've Zoomed with a few of the elderly sisters that are there just because they needed contact. They needed to have that outreach. I celebrated one of the sisters' 50th Jubilee as a sister. But we had a Mass and it was just her and I. And there was a plexiglass between us, just for her safety and my safety. But to be able to celebrate is so important. To be able to mourn together is so important. I know my mom's mentioned a number of times over this period of time. My sister Kelly died 2 years ago on Good Friday. She was 49 years old. had lung cancer. She was diagnosed on February 17th, died April 19th. It went very quickly. But we were able to be together. We were able to be in the hospital together. So often when I get called up to Bergen, to people that are near death, there's no one there. Or there may be one person there that's been allowed in. And so difficult for families to mourn together, to have that support. And I don't know how we would have done it without the support of each other and the support of extended family, the support of friends. That all made that a lot easier, and we recognize how important that unity is. But that unity is a challenge, because it calls us to love and truly love one another. I learned this lesson when I was a senior in college. We had Mass the beginning of the school year on our floors. And Merle Kolash, who is a priest of the Sioux City Diocese, was the priest that was assigned to our floor on the seminary. And so we had a Mass together, and we were down in the lounge. And for the homily, he was talking to us as seniors. He was asking, how do you want to be remembered when you leave? And we talked about, one as good examples, models. And then he was challenging us, well, you need to start doing that now, and living that. And then he asked the freshmen, you're new to the community. What do you need from the upperclassmen? But then he asked all of us, what is your desire for the whole seminary? And we said, we want to be a community. We want to work to be a community. He said, impossible. You can't do that. You can't create community. You can't just work at it and you can't work on community. He said, what you can do is you can work on loving one another. And he said, once you love one another, then community is a gift of the Holy Spirit. It's a gift of the Holy Spirit that is given to any group of people that has learned to love one another. That's when you truly have community. And so to truly love one another and to be formed in that community and to have that unity, I think that there's some important things. And the Holy Father kind of touches on that, some of these, when he talks about that fasting. One is to listen to one another. You truly listen from the heart. And that's a skill that can be difficult to develop. To listen and not be thinking, okay, what am I going to say next? What do I have to do next? But to be able to listen to the other person. To listen to what's going on and listen to what's not being said in there. And to truly listen to the other. Because our desire is to be heard. I don't think there's any one of us that wouldn't want to be heard. As we listen, then it's to affirm one another. To find the positive. To affirm the goodness in others. And to seek and to find that. Jesus, when he was being challenged, at one point says, you're like kids in the square. I play you a tune and you will not dance. I play you a dirge and you will not mourn. He said, you're looking for a reason to be upset. And we're going to find whatever it is that we look for. If we choose to find the good in a person, we're going to find it. If we choose to find the bad in the person, we will find it. It's what we choose to seek. And if we seek good and truly seek to affirm others, then it's going to help with that unity, to listen to them and to affirm them, to affirm the other person. Because there is a goodness that is in each and every one of us. And when we do that, we lift people up. They're encouraged. The other thing is to understand a person and understand each other. You know, there's such a divide, and it's been talked about a lot in our country, of a political divide, social divides, and the heart of it, I think, is a lack of understanding. We don't take the time to listen to each other, to find the good in each other, or to understand each other a lot of times. And I know that that's a challenge for me. It's something I need to continually work on. One of the books I read a couple years ago was Them. It was written by Senator Ben Sasse, and talks about how we've it's us and them, and difference. He talked about growing up in Fremont, where, you know, he went to Fremont High. His father coached at Fremont High, and the them were those evil people over in Columbus. They're no good in Columbus. I heard something similar when I was in West Point. The evil people in Battle Creek, they had steroids in the water. That's why their football team was so good. That's why the girls' basketball team was so good. It's just, through that period of time, through the 80s and 90s, even the 70s, Battle Creek dominated football. There was one season they didn't punt at all. They just dominated other teams. And my first year teaching at West Point, now growing up in Omaha, I didn't hear a lot about rural teams. I didn't know a lot about those. But when I got to West Point, I was talking to the juniors that I taught, and I was asking them, you know, who are you guys playing this week? And they said, oh, Father, don't even go to the game. I said, it won't even be worth it. They're already defeated. They were playing Battle Creek. I said, they're that good? And they said, yeah, they just dominate. Sure enough, I went to the game, and it was a blowout. West Point Central Catholic lost big in that game. But, you know, they were the evil ones. When I became pastor in Battle Creek with Father Joe, you didn't find a whole lot of evil people in Battle Creek, did you?
No, they're pretty good.
No, a lot of great people there.
But they were on the
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, and the evil football coach, was also the evil girls basketball coach. He coached both of those. He was on my building committee in the parish. He was besides teacher and coach, he also worked construction. When I moved from Battle Creek to Hooper, he helped me move. He had his trailer and helped me load up my stuff. He was not an evil guy. We start to learn about others. We start to understand them. They're not that evil, but we get this us and them sort of thing. Ben Sasse talks about going to college. He had a roommate from Columbus. Realized that they were not bad people. It was the people in Oklahoma that were evil at that point. You know, it's always the them that's there. And we need to grow in that understanding. I look at myself, you know, we have more in common than we have that are different. I was listening to Jeff Foxworthy the other day. I was driving around, and I have Sirius XM, and I was listening to his and Larry the Cable Guy's channel. But he was interviewing another comedian. And this other comedian is from Iranian descent. And he is talking about, you know, some of the jokes that I tell, they get the same kind of laugh in Los Angeles as they get in Dubai. People are the same. We see the extremes. And in the news, we see the extremes. And those that dominate social media are the extremes. Most of us are in the middle. And most of us, for the 95% of things, agree. He said one of the jokes that he tells that gets that same laugh in both places, he says, you know, when I was growing up, all my friends were my parents' kids. Now I'm an adult, and all my friends are my kids' parents, or my kids' friends' parents. People have an understanding of that. There's an understanding. The first time that I ever traveled overseas, I had the opportunity when I was an associate in Fremont to be a tour representative for Mustache Joe Tours for a trip over to the Alps. And we're in Switzerland, and we're on the bus, and it was in the morning, and we're driving. And there was a mother and father walking their two daughters to school. Girls had the uniforms on, just very much like our students here have uniforms on. And they're holding hands walking to school. And you could see that anywhere in the world. Parents loving their children, taking care of them, wanting what's best for them. We have a lot more in common. I've used the example before. People say there was a sports radio person here in Omaha a number of years ago who said you couldn't be a Creighton fan and a Nebraska fan, that you had to be one or the other. Well, I'm both. And in my closet, there's blue Creighton shirts and there's red Nebraska shirts. And in my political view, there are red ideas and there are blue ideas. And most all of us are like that. There are extremes, but we need to see where we stand together to understand each other, and where we do have differences to listen, and why they have those differences and differences of opinion. One of the things, and I mentioned before we began, that I was talking to Eckley about baseball, and Ken Burns in his documentary talks about baseball being the national pastime for a long time and how that helped us as a nation. And it's good to have baseball in a democratic nation. The problem with us in the United States is football has become the national pastime. And that's not helpful for a democracy. Because in baseball, you only succeed about 300 or 30% of the time. A hitter who hits 350, 35% of the time is an all-star. To reach 400 is almost impossible to hit 40% of the time. A pitcher, if they win half their games, that's a great season. You lose. Players will lay down a bunt to advance another player, or a sacrifice fly. They sacrifice their at-bat for another to advance for the team. And that's a great image, because in politics and discussion and policy, we can't win all the time. But football is you don't give an inch. There's a line there, and you don't let the other person cross that line. And that is kind of how our political discourse is right now. There's not that give and take. There's not that sacrifice. We're two opposing teams up against each other. Or that's how they like it to be. But we need to grow in that understanding. Another way to grow in that love is to be generous. Generous like God is. When we're grateful, and I talked a bit about this last night, when we're grateful, when we recognize the gifts we receive, we can be generous with the gifts and sharing our gifts with others. And that's part of that fasting too, is as we fast, it opens ourselves up. I'm amazed at how much money I've saved. One of the things with this Exodus 90 is not spending money on unnecessary things. I got money in my wallet. I got money in my bank account that I don't usually have. I started to realize how much unnecessary that I can spend in a day or in a week. But that also opens me up to be able to be more generous in sharing what I have, because I realize how much I do have. And when I sacrifice and when I give up, it leaves more. I'm not trying to consume everything out of greed, as the Holy Father says, but to sacrifice in love. I think another piece of that generosity, though, too, is that gratitude, being grateful. And grateful changes our attitude. When we truly are grateful, it changes our attitude and how we face others and how we face the world. And it's good for us to be grateful, to take time to give thanks. Getting back to baseball, there's the baseball card study. Has anyone ever heard of it? They studied rookie cards, and they looked at the players and if they were smiling or not. The ones that were smiling on their rookie cards lived 6 years longer than those that were not, when they studied the rookie cards through baseball over the years. Related to that, there is the Nun Study. And it's a study of religious sisters. And because they could trace them all through their life, and they have access and records going back a long time, They looked at the sisters' autobiographies that they wrote when they entered into the convent, and the more positive words they used in describing themselves and their life, their average lifespan was much greater than those that were negative. Gratitude has a way of changing us, our disposition, our own health, but also in opening us to other people, and that gratitude for what we have received makes us generous. And then the other thing is to heal. As human beings, we need to heal. We need to be able to forgive. The gospel reading for tonight, for the weekday of this third Tuesday of Lent, was Matthew's gospel, Peter coming up to Jesus. How many times must I forgive my brother? 7 times? No, not 7 times. I say 77 times. That we need to be able to forgive, and we need to be able to heal. And that's one of the most difficult things. When I had the 5:30 Mass tonight here, talked about that's one of the greatest challenges for me, is to truly forgive. Jesus says you must forgive your brothers and sisters from your heart. And to do that is necessary to heal. We need to be very good at that, of forgiving. But it is challenging. They say women always forgive and never forget. And men always forget and never forgive. We need to do both. And forgetting doesn't mean we actually forget. As human beings, we have memory. But it doesn't affect us in the same way. We need to be able to forgive. I don't know if I've told this story here before, but I may have, and I'm sorry if I have. But when I was in the seminary, at St. Paul Seminary, one of the people who lived in the seminary was not a seminarian, was David Haas, who is a composer. And he's been in the news recently, unfortunately, for some inappropriate behavior with women, harassment, and that. David, when he was 30 years ago, lived in the seminary, and he was an in-house composer there. And he lived in the basement. And one day I was coming back from class, and I was kind of in a hurry, and I wanted to go down to the building, the dorm building I lived in the basement was the mailroom. And so I was going to hurry and get there because it was like Wednesday, and I talked to my dad Sunday, and he was sending a check, and it hadn't got there Tuesday. And so I was out of cash, and I wanted it. And so I just really quickly opened the door, and on the inside it was a push bar, and on the outside it was a handle, and I just pulled really quick, and I pulled David Haas through the door. His hands were on the handle. And he started yelling at me that I need to be more careful. I didn't do it intentionally. It wasn't like I was watching for him and then pulling him through. But he said, I'm a musician and my hands were so important. And I'm thinking in my head, oh yeah, whatever. But kind of let that go and just kind of moved on with my day. I wasn't a big fan of David Haas's. He has beautiful music. One of the songs that he has is You Are Mine. I love you and you are mine. And it's a beautiful tune. And a number of years ago when I was in Hooper and Scribner, took a group of kids skiing. And we got up to Laramie, Wyoming, went up to Snowy Range, went skiing that first day of skiing, great day. Got there safe. Everyone got done skiing for the day. We're back in the van. And the van that I was in, they had a CD in. So turned on the car, and that song came on. A beautiful song. And my first thought was, David Haas is such an ass. It's just, and it wasn't like I'd been thinking about him or that event, but that just came to mind, just in that moment, that obviously I'd not forgiven him yet. Forgiveness is that process. When I thought that, when I heard that song, all those things came rushing back. And I realized our forgiveness is not like God's. God's forgiveness is complete. We need that process of constantly going back to the Lord, praying for that, handing it over. Now, when I tell that story, I can tell it a lot better than I could right after it happened, because I was still angry. I was still hurt. Still had that unforgiveness. Over time, handing that over enables me to forgive. And we need to be able to forgive, and it is that process of forgiveness. And we need to be able to pray to be able to do that. That's the only way we can do that. And so if we're going to grow in unity and love, it is to have that humility. As the Holy Father said, to fast from those things that hurt that unity, and to listen, to affirm, to understand, to be generous, to heal. You don't know what that spells. To listen, to affirm, to understand, to be generous, to heal, to laugh. When we are united with one another, the laughter comes through. When we truly love one another, that laughter comes through. Robert Fultram tells a story about watching a kid play hide and seek, and the kid is hiding in the leaves right underneath his window. And the kids are trying, everyone's been caught except this one, and he finally yells at the kid to get caught, and the kid goes running off. But he talks about the difference between hide and seek and sardines. Where sardines is where one person goes and hides, and everyone tries to find him, and once you find him, you hide with them. Well, eventually everyone gets found because of the laughter, because of the noise that's being made. We're meant to be together. That's where the joy is going to come. That's where the support is going to come. That's truly to be united with one another. That's to love one another. We do that, and fasting is a way that we do that together and help to build that unity. Once again, I want to thank you for the invitation to be here. I want to thank Colleen and Ann, who I worked with in organizing this, and Rita and Father Joe for helping with this. Cindy for helping with the music and getting into the theme with the jersey also. Appreciate that. And it's been great to be here back at St. Pius and to see all of you and to thank you for being here. Thank you for your generosity in your support of Catholic Charities, and to thank all those who have been live streaming, or if you're watching this after it's been done there. Just remind those that are live streaming, if you'd like to make donation to Catholic Charities, you can always go to ccomaha.org to make that donation. One of the things that shows that unity that we have with one another is to pray together, and especially that prayer that our Savior taught us. So let us stand and pray together in Our Father. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Thank you very much, Father Mike, for coming. You're always welcome here. Thank you for all your help. I have good news. Father Gaddaci got back at about 1:30 today. So he'll probably have to quarantine for a little bit, but he told me he planned on doing the African Mass on Sunday, so I imagine he'll be back in the rotation on Monday. So, but thank you very much. You know you're always welcome here.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks.
And I understand it's your birthday.
What's that?
Your birthday is Saturday?
Yes.
Can we sing to you?
Sure.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Father Boy. Happy birthday to you.
Thank you very much. I will be 56. Yes, yes.
They will know we are Christians by our love, not by words, but how we live. Yes, they'll know we are Christians by our love, by our love. When we feed them hungry, they will know by our love. Lifting up the lowly by our love, by our love. We are one in the Spirit, we are one in the Lord, and we pray that all unity may one day be restored. By our love, by our love. Yes, they'll know we are Christians by our love, not by words, but how we live. Yes, they'll know we are Christians by our love, by our love. When we welcome strangers, they will know by our love. Sheltered from the homeless by our love, by our love. We will walk with each other, we will walk hand in hand, and together we'll spread the news that God is in our land. By our love, by our love, they will know we are Christians by our love, not by words, but how we live. Yes, they'll know we are Christians by our love, by our love. Freedom to the captives, they will know by our love. Comfort to the broken by our love, by our love. We will walk with each other, we will work side by side, and we'll guard each other's dignity and share each other's pride. By our love, by our love, they will know we are Christians by our love, not by words, but how we live. Yes, they'll know we are Christians by our love, by our love.
The Lord be with you. May Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Let's go forth. Let us pray for one another. Peace.